Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining the Rising the Ranks as a Female in Fintech event. I am Margaret Campbell, and I lead our recruitment teams for technology and investor investment solutions here at LPL Financial. Today, I have the honor of hosting and helping facilitate this incredible discussion. Between working, life, and the million things in between, I know just how busy everyone is, so I can't tell you how amazed and thankful we are that this event received more than 500, yes, I said 500 registrations, a true testament to how relevant and exciting this topic really is. I'm equally as thankful to our three leaders here who have graciously offered their time and willingness to share their stories with both our internal employees and our external resources in an effort to rise together. Before introducing our rockstar panelists, I want to thank those of you who took the time to submit questions to this event. Our number one priority was to ensure we covered exactly what you, as the audience, want to hear and learn from our panelists. It was amazing to see not only the sheer volume of questions, but the depth and thoughtfulness behind each one that I am confident is going to lead to really impactful conversations here today. All right, now let's meet our speakers. We've got three powerhouse industry vets who have distinguished careers building teams, transforming products, and innovating within their domains. In addition to the myriad of accomplishments that they each have, they have simultaneously built an incredible brand for themselves and successfully moved up the corporate ladder in the traditionally male-dominated industry of fintech. Kate, Kristie, Megan, first and foremost, thank you guys so much for being here, investing your time to share with us, and really, for the first time, doing a forum like this. Before we dive into questions from our participants, would each of you mind providing an introduction on yourself and share what you hope the crowd takes away from attending today's event?
Hey, so I'm Megan Perry. I have been in the industry for 30 years, believe it or not. I spent 20 plus years at BNY Mellon before I moved over to LPL almost 6 years ago. Um, what would I like out of this session, to be honest? I wish whenever I was looking for that next step, I wish I had people to ask these questions to.
Yeah.
I wish I had people that I could lean on and that I could actually even follow around if needed.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that everybody, both across the board, can basically get some of that we didn't get way back when.
I love that. That's amazing. Kate?
Thanks. I'm Kate Shackleton, and I joined LPL just over a year ago. I lead our trust business, and prior to that, I was leading corporate strategy and new ventures, which is our innovation arm, which is how I got to know Kristie. And I've been in the industry for over 2 decades and have had great experiences throughout my career doing a variety of different things from product management to technology to operations to finance. And the point of that is I had to figure it out myself. Built my own management training program, if you will, and I rotated around to the different functions to really get a comprehensive view of how the business works. But I really wish someone had helped me with that. So to echo Megan's thoughts, these are great opportunities to learn from folks like us that have trodden the path before you, and we're happy to answer questions and share what we've learned. And that's really why I'm here today. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. Last but not least.
So, hi, I'm Kristie Edling-Day. It's nice to meet all of you. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time out. We're busy, but everybody's busy, and you're making the time, so it's great. I've been in the industry for just under 2 decades. I'm relatively new to LPL, so I joined about 6 months ago. Our CIO and head of our advisor experienced technology. Prior to that, and for the majority of that, almost 2 decades in the industry, I was at a mutual fund company called Vanguard. And so I spent 17 years there. Started as an engineer out of college, left not long ago, and was the CIO for 2 of the 4 client-facing businesses that they have. And it was, Megan and Kate, really great to hear, kind of where you were coming from, because I would say I had an opposite experience. I had so much help along the way. And I think some of that is being at one company for such a long time, amazing people, amazing mentors, and amazing experience. And, I think back on a lot of those people who helped me, and I think that the only way that I can pay them back, because I owe them so much, is by paying it forward. And so an event like this, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for having us, because it's a way to say, hey, I've had so many people invest in me. How do I give some of that back?
Yeah.
A couple other things I want to share just to make the experience relevant. Outside of work, I am a relatively new mom. So I struggled with infertility for 5 years, my husband and I. And so I have an 18-month-old son now. It's the best thing ever. So husband and family as well. So I'm juggling a career and also trying to navigate that as well.
Yep.
And I know many of you probably have a similar.
Oh yeah, I can relate to that deeply. Well, thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you just for initially sharing. And we've got 80 minutes left to dive in. So again, thank you guys for submitting these amazing questions. Let's get to it. So I will start with maybe what you would call some softballs, a couple easier ones before we get into the juicier questions. So just to begin, what are you guys the most proud of in your career? And Kristie, I know you ended, but we can start with you and work our way back.
Sure. So I would say, if I was thinking about the question ahead of time, it would really be two things. And it plays off of what I shared in my introduction. I am happiest when I am helping other people. And so when I think back on some of those things that I am the most proud of, it's really the number of people that I've helped, the people who trust me. It was really scary leaving a company after such a long time. I was worried about losing many of those relationships. Many have stayed in touch, and I've been able to continue to build those relationships and feel like I can continue to be of help and support. When I think many of them are women, many of them are peers, and I think, one of something that means a tremendous amount to me. Many of them are my bosses. Some of my closest friends are prior bosses, and so that just tells me like, hey, I've been able to invest and make a difference, and that is something that I'm truly proud of. And on a more personal note, I think the second one is how much I look back and realize I've grown. I've made many mistakes, and I think it's easy. You hear people say, well, people don't really change. There have been a few moments in my career that were coincided with life events where I can look back and say, like, I changed. Starting my career, I had more pointy elbows and I was a little bit more out for myself. And I've had a couple of inflection points, and being able to look back at that and say, like, I've grown as a human and a leader. I'm big on that. And so I'm proud of myself for that journey as well.
Yeah, I think you are the definition of not seeing other women as competition. Our first meeting, you said iron sharpens iron, and I think you believe that, and it shows with how you operate. So I love that.
I can vouch for that. One of our first meetings that we were in together, it was a exciting, dynamic conversation with a lot of people that wanted to have a point of view. And Kristie was the type of leader who would bring the voices forward that maybe weren't being heard, and would echo things that I was saying and give me credit for that.
Yeah.
And I just love that. It was instantaneously what you just described, that
right.
a woman supporting another woman. That's right.
Well, it means a lot because, like I said, I've grown. That wasn't always me. So thank you.
You're
Kate,
welcome. Well, thank you. But it's a fair point, because I think when we were earlier in our careers, oftentimes we might have been the only woman in the room. And so you didn't even necessarily get the sort of experience of what it's like to support another woman's voice. Yeah. That's really changed in the last probably 5 years, I would say. I see so many more women in the room, which is fantastic. And sort of to your question, what are you most proud of? Some of it is sticking with this career and sticking with the challenges that you're faced on a day-to-day basis, and making sure that you've developed a voice and a brand that's thoughtful, and that is respected, and people come to you for guidance and wisdom. I'd also echo what you said in terms of helping others. Remember the first time I had the opportunity to build new roles on my team, so net new, I thought to myself, I'm creating a job for someone. Like, this job is going to give them health care, and it's going to make them feel good about themselves, that they're contributing, and it's going to support their families. And it was just striking. Like, that's a really big responsibility and so cool. And I will just never forget that. When the first person that got that new role came in, I thought, I'm going to change this person's life. And then it became my responsibility. Their career was now my responsibility, and something to take really seriously.
Yeah.
So I love that about what we do.
Build off of that just one more.
Please.
I think another point of that is the whole mentee versus mentor versus sponsorship. Throughout the career, I've done all. I've been a mentee, I then turned into a mentor, and then I even had a sponsor. And I think that has, to to Kristie's point, you grow as a woman. I think we lean on one another more. And there can be little things as small as it's a Friday afternoon and somebody's pinging you to say, just checking in to see how you're doing.
Yeah.
It's just so different than it was years ago. And I
Right.
think we all, we drive off of that.
Yeah.
And the right company fosters that.
Yes.
And I think that, kind of when we'll talk more about careers as we go, but I think all three of us would say we found that in the company that we're at right now, where women do support other women, and
Yeah.
it's an amazing thing.
Yeah. Completely agree. And I don't want to shortchange you. I want to hear what you're proud of.
I added in.
You're sure?
good.
Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, guys. Well, how would you describe your leadership style? And this is where it will be a little more controversial. How do you feel it is different than some of your male counterparts? Kate, I will let you start.
Sure. So I think leadership, different than management, is really the environment that you create for everyone to be successful, sort of what we're talking about here, and how you care for others. And to me, my leadership style is really based on the individual. And so I really try to cater to the needs, the maturity, the experience that individual on my team is bringing to the table. And then I think that has a multiplier effect, and it creates a culture in an organization that is reflective of the collective whole.
Yeah.
Not to say that men don't take a similar approach, but it does require a heightened level of EQ and to be really thoughtful and to get to know the person. And that's something that I've evolved in over time. And so that's how I like to think about leadership. And to the sort of controversial component to it, I don't know that makes me different as a woman versus a man. I've had really thoughtful male managers through the years that have cared about my personal life and my career and have helped me along the way and been mentors and sponsors to me. So I think that really, at least in my mind, that's an individual style topic.
Agreed. Anything you guys would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add, what I will add, I guess, to the conversation is like there's the characteristically male and characteristically female. But Kate, like you, I've had experiences where all were blended. And so as I think about my leadership style, I would really say it's a tapestry of all of the best bosses that I've admired the most. And you know what? All of the worst bosses and what I remember the most and say, like, I don't ever want to do that. The one thing that I will say is more characteristically female, although ironically the boss that I learned the most from this was a man, that I think is a differentiator for female leaders. We have an easier time doing is vulnerability.
Yes.
And being willing to say, I might not understand this, or can you help me, or hey, I was wrong and I'm willing to admit it, and that, or hey guys, I'm struggling with something and I need your input. Like that is one of those moments where I think as a leader, you want to be strong and you want to always be in control. What I have found about the leaders I have most admired following is they're willing to say those things. And I think I had that moment of, okay, I want to follow this person because they seem so human to me. So I need to do a bit more of that. But I do think that's one area where men have to lean into it at times harder than women too, because I think it comes more naturally to us.
Okay, that is such an interesting one, because I'm sorry to derail this one. I think just a sidebar on that of growing up also in technology, a male-dominated industry, I felt a lot like I had to hide vulnerability because I wanted to fit in and I didn't want to seem weak, and I really wanted to act as though I was an equal partner in those ways. And so it took me a really long time to realize there's strength in the vulnerability, and that is more relatable. And I mean, almost a decade. So is that something you felt was learned, or you just naturally had that?
I think it comes with confidence, honestly. And I think if you're not confident, you may lean into being closed off and not willing to have a conversation where you might not know the answers. But I have found as I've grown as a leader, I lean into that vulnerability. I have a new responsibility of the firm. And the first thing I've done is sat with people and said, tell me what you do. I know nothing about what you do. Talk to me about what you're doing. Why does this matter for our clients? And I think you have to get to a certain level of confidence and maturity before you're actually willing to be quite that vulnerable.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add?
I think the only thing that I would add into all of that, because those were all really good points, was I think the piece that really sticks out when we talk about women versus men is it really is that nature over or nurture over nature, as they call it, right? It's your motherly instinct.
Yeah.
And I think that everywhere that I've been, I really try to take the time, no matter what role or where they sit in the hierarchy. They matter
Yeah.
just as much. Like you are truly all equal. And before coming to LPL, I didn't see that.
Mhm.
Like your role, your title,
Yeah.
depending on your title, depending on what you would get to do. And I've taken that and said, I'm not going to let that happen. And so it's so key that you make sure you understand everyone and you leave that out.
Yeah.
And you realize that everybody's a person. And at the end of the day, you come up with a lot better solutions, anyways,
Yeah.
and a better leader.
Agree completely. Okay, I'm going to jump around a little just to build off from what you guys had said of just how your leadership style can change when you grow confidence. How have you all built confidence over the course of your career?
I think it's as simple as you are adding new skills and you have to reflect back on how you've changed, but it comes with investing the time to get smarter about the business, and it's about going above and beyond. It's about really being a good listener and absorbing from those around you. I do think, though, to the earlier points, it's really hard to do that by yourself.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a network of people that you can count on to bring you up with them, and it's not always about riding someone else's coattails, though that is great when that happens, but it is just about being a part of a group of people that you can trust and you're learning from and that have a style you relate to. And I totally agree with what you said, Megan, in terms of you need to invest in everyone and hear the voices of everyone as an individual. I do think that is unique to our culture.
Yeah.
Very unique to our culture here, in that I'll just give you an example. We had a really important board meeting this summer, and you would think it's a closed door environment, which it is in an appropriate way. But we brought two of the junior people that worked on the materials to the room to learn, to absorb. We gave them an opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting and do the wrap up. And you wouldn't find that at other firms. It was awesome to see. And there was a young woman there who will hopefully be watching this, one of our AVPs in strategy, who did a fantastic job in front of a room of people with 30 plus years of experience. So I think that that is a really cool aspect of our culture. And it is what builds the confidence over time.
You know, I'm going to be a little controversial and suggest something that has been instrumental in my confidence, because if I look back, I got a lot of coaching over the course of my career. You need to be more confident, trust your instincts, trust your intuition. It's really good. If I look back, like, why do I have the confidence that I have today? A lot of it was through the mistakes that I made, not the mistakes themselves, but the resilience of bouncing back from them and realizing that's not the end. And I'm stronger than this. And I learned from this. And now I have a whole new set of things that I know that I won't make that mistake again. And watching, hey, the people that care about you don't care that you made a mistake. In fact, they tend to rally around you. And that you have, a lot of times I think we set our own limits of what we think we're capable of. And when we break those limits, even if we make a mistake the first time, but we've taken a risk and taken a chance, regardless of how it turns out the first time, that sort of a moment of picking yourself back up and saying, hey, that was okay. Like I didn't die. In fact, I'm stronger than I was before. Actually, I think makes it easier to take the next risk and the next chance. And it's almost like a muscle, whether it's speaking up in meetings or the putting runs on the board, I guess, is one of those ways of just saying, like, hey, I'm going to keep trying, and every time I'm going to get a little bit more confident in doing it, until one day you look back and it's like, hey, I feel confident now.
And it's natural.
And it's natural.
Yeah.
And it's not fake, because we've all seen the fake confidence, which turns into arrogance and exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you say that. I think as women, often we have this expectation we have to be perfect, right? And you find pretty quickly, no one expected that from us but ourselves. And so in the mistakes, you think, man, I can't believe I messed up, when everyone expects you to mess up. And it takes you the longest to typically realize that. And I find leading a team, the more mistakes I make, the more it empowers them to feel comfortable to take risks and take chances and make their own mistakes.
Especially if you admit it and say, I was
Right.
wrong. Here's the mistake I made.
Right?
You made it safe for them
Yeah.
to fail and make a
Totally.
mistake.
Very good point.
Yeah,
Yep.
so good.
Yeah.
But I think just the one additional point, because I was exactly going to say, it's one thing to admit to your mistakes and
Yeah.
learn from them and grow, which Kristie, you picked right up on. It was one of my points. But the second point is to be curious,
Yeah.
be willing to speak up. You're not going to be able to learn, grow, really have that confidence if you
Yeah.
don't speak up first.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many people that they sit in a meeting and they're quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much going on in their heads, right?
Mhm.
And you know, when you sit with them one-on-one, you've heard it. It's like, just bring it out,
Yeah.
right? And by doing that, it does build your confidence. And
Yeah.
so what if you fail?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I was guilty of this earlier in my career. I felt like I had to make a brilliant statement.
Yes.
And like the pressure of needing to make the brilliant
Right.
statements, like I don't have anything brilliant to say, so you don't say anything. And I had somebody, a mentor years ago, say a really good question is much more brilliant often
Right.
than a brilliant statement.
Mhm.
And it, especially if you're learning a domain or you're in a new
Right.
company, that comfort in saying and asking a question, a lot of times it's not a dumb question.
Right.
And it brings things in a new direction, or other people had the question and didn't speak up. So for any of you who may be listening and thinking, how do I get started with this? How do I start to speak up in meetings? Try asking questions.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Try to avoid the analysis paralysis. I think everyone has had it at some point. Awesome. I love that. Okay. So you guys have all worked at a number of incredible places, right? I mean, there's been no shortage of great places that you have had great experiences, innovation, built great products. What is it that, one, made you want to make the switch to come here? And two, what excites you about what you're doing?
Want me to start?
Yeah,
let's
I'll
do it.
start
Yeah.
today. So as far as what excites me day in and day out, it is we have the ability to ideate.
Mhm.
And every time we make a change, there's always 4 more changes that might make us go that much further. And so in the ever-changing environment, it gives you the ability to use your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I love about LPL, because number one, they care about their employees, which a lot of organizations I've worked in the past, they didn't.
Yeah.
The people are phenomenal. Everybody that I've met here and I've grown with for the past 6 years who have come and gone, my network has just grown tremendously with amazing women and men, for that matter. But it's the challenge. Like, I love being able to walk in every day and say, you know what, I have a plan, but 20 minutes into my day, my plan has totally changed. And that's fine. That's fine. That's part of the journey. And that's part of the, you know what, I'm going to make this day better than yesterday. And I think LPL backs us up in that way. And that's something I've never felt in any other organization I've ever been in.
Agree fully.
It is an exciting place to be. It's hard to argue that we are not the cutting edge, the organization to be watching and chasing. And that was how LPL got on my radar, because as a strategist, I had to see what everyone else was doing. And quietly, you just saw this growth over at LPL, and I wanted to know more. But truly, what got me here was the team that stayed in touch with me when I wasn't an employee for 4 years. They would check in. How's your career going? Are you feeling supported? Are your aspirations being delivered upon?
Yeah.
Have you gotten new challenges? And I would say, tell me more. And I thought, wow, if they're doing this for me and I don't even work here, what must it be like
That's so
to
true.
work at LPL? And so I have to give credit to the folks that got to know me through a pipelining process as a candidate, that they left an indelible impression on me. So to our executive recruiting team, kudos to you. You're
Yes.
phenomenal. But also, you know, now that I'm here, I
Yeah.
see it's true. And I work for someone who has really taken the time to get to know me, to learn about me, and to place me into situations that, to your point, you don't always think you could be in that position. Well, gosh, someone believed in me, and they've given me some exciting challenges to undertake. And I just think that that is really rare, to your point, a company that cares so much about their employees. We're not a number, we're not a spreadsheet, we're a person with a path and contributions to make, and it's really wonderful. So I couldn't say enough good things about how that's part of our culture.
Yep.
And the ethos of the firm.
It's funny that you express if they treat me like this before I get here. I didn't know if maybe that was me, so it's really cool to hear that your experience was the same, because after such a long time at one company, and by the way, we'll talk in other questions about kind of what brought me to LPL, because it wasn't that I wasn't getting the support as a woman or the career development or none of it. It was more really personal reasons. But the why did I come here started with how they are really investing and they're really interested and they're really treating me really well. But then, I think for me, it has been 3 reasons, why come in the first place. I was really excited about the business strategy. I'm a big picture person. I want to understand the strategy. I want to see where it's going. Kate, you kind of said like LPL has been one to watch, for a while. And I was serving financial advisors and technology at Vanguard. So I had some familiarity with LPL where I had the brand recognition where others may not. As a CIO, it's really important for me to be at a company where technology is central to that strategy. I'm not tech for tech. It doesn't matter if it's not the latest technology. For me, it's like, what does technology do to fuel the business? And it is a compelling business strategy with a compelling growth ahead. So I would say that's probably the first reason. The second that is really exciting for me and a different experience is how close we get to be to the clients. I think I had seen that in your notes, actually. Megan, I know you and I have talked about how different that is here too. As a senior technology leader, to not be sort of in the tech boiler room, but to be out in front on stage at conferences, meeting with advisors, and they call directly or they send me an email directly, to feel and touch and see it. And then to be able to lead teams to say what you're doing every day exactly just addressed this person's feedback, like that's really cool. And then the last thing, I will echo what both of you said, the people are amazing. And there's no politics, very low politics. You bring humans and there's some politics, but like it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. I thought what you said too about just having a boss who sees something in you. And I think the best thing we can all have in our career is a boss who sees your superpowers, even if maybe you don't believe in yourself yet. They know you can do something and give you that chance. So I love that. And we'll go right into it, right? You guys have all made career changes. You've all switched from one company to another. And I think there's so much that goes into making that decision, especially, Kristie, I'm excited to hear from you about this one when you've been somewhere for a really long time. And how did you guys know when it was time to make a career change?
I think it's multifold, and it depends on where you are in your career journey. I think it becomes much harder later in your career journey when, to your point around network and having the people that you can call upon and kind of how the system works. It's very different. Earlier in my career, I have consultant DNA. I worked at Deloitte Consulting, and I was just always fascinated by, I want to try something new. I want to try something different. And I was kind of captivated by working at a couple of different firms. And so I spent a number of years at Morgan Stanley because, to your point around being close to the client, I thought, well, this is fascinating. This is a very technology-driven organization that was really getting innovative in the wealth management technology space. I wanted to be a part of that. And then when I was there, I was really fortunate in the same sort of way I just described. I had someone that I worked for who recognized, hey, you should do something different. I want to pull you over to this other initiative. And so I was lucky enough to build their private bank. And at a relatively early point in my career, I got the OCC charter for their private bank. It was like so cool. I didn't even know what the OCC stood for when I started that project, which now, funny enough, I'm working with the OCC again. But it was so cool. And I thought, oh, wow, private banking is amazing. We were building everything in a way to model what the number one global private bank did. Well, that number one global private bank called me and said, hey, we want you to come join us. So I was enticed by that. And I made the move in part because I thought, I've just tried to emulate what you're doing. I want to be on the inside of that company that is doing whatever it takes to be the #1 global private bank.
Right.
So I followed that instinct, but what I took for granted at that time in my career was all the brand equity that I had built at my prior firm. And so it was a good experience. I got to now work for a global company and do very different things. And I really learned finance because I went to JP Morgan, which is a very finance-oriented organization. But there were things that were missing. And so I had to kind of try a couple of other things before I found what was the right fit. And I think you have to trust your instincts on that, but you also don't want to move too much.
Right.
And I learned that lesson as, again, a younger person, that, you've got to kind of see what else there is within your own company and try different things. And so the advice I guess I would give is, if you're feeling a little bit misplaced, or maybe you felt like you've kind of run your course with what you're doing, it's really smart to start by thinking about what else is inside this company that's interesting to me. Now, I think we're really lucky at LPL that people get to move around. That doesn't happen everywhere. So for the folks listening who are at a different company, I recognize that this advice may not apply as well at other firms the way that it does here. But I think you have to start there.
Yeah.
And then, really ask yourself, what is it that's missing? Are my values aligned to the role that I'm working on? And can I see myself somewhere longer term? As I've said, I made the move to LPL because, to your point, I loved the business strategy. I loved what we were doing. But I also knew that the reason the job was open that they were talking to me about was because the prior leader had built something and was now running it and had launched a whole new business for the firm. And she got to go run that business. And I thought, well, that's the kind of place that I would want to be. And you want to be at a firm that allows you to take those kinds of risks and things.
And she being a she didn't matter. I mean, it didn't hurt anything.
It was the cherry on top, to be honest. But yes, that's true. That is true.
I'll build on something you said, Kate, because I'm glad that you too recognize the value of moving around internally, and that really should be a first question before saying, like, hey, do I want to make the leap to a whole new company? And you mentioned like your instincts as well. So, what I was going to say as an answer to that question, in my experience, you will know, your gut will tell you when it's time. And then it's just a question of, is it a new role at the same company? And up, for 17 years of my career, the right answer was a new role at the same company. And most recently, obviously, it was a new role at a new company, which was much bigger and much harder. But, sometimes we get so busy that we forget to listen to ourselves. And so I would also say, make sure as you're, starting to have that question, that you're listening to the people around you as well. Like in my experience, it was the people around me that I trusted the most and that was the closest to, who had started to ask questions before I even, realized, hey, I think what I might be looking at is a major life change in changing companies. So, I have two sort of practical pieces of advice. If you're trying to say, hey, am I at that point? Like, am I, thinking that I need to make a change, whether it's within the company or outside? The first is, do you recognize yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you look back sort of over the course of time, like, are you suddenly in a place where you don't recognize yourself anymore? In my case, because, I'm passionate, I'm engaged, I'm motivated, I'm fulfilled. Like, I even say joyful, like I love to work. And if getting to the point where it's like, hey, I don't recognize those things in myself anymore, that's kind of like a first trigger.
Yeah.
And then I want to share a framework that I use often for many things when I'm trying to analyze like feelings and what I should learn from them. I call it the what, why, what framework. So if you're sort of in this, like, hey, I'm not recognizing myself anymore, it's the what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? And what does that tell me about next steps? Because sometimes, like, the feelings can be so overwhelming that you either take the, you jump ship before you should, or you make the wrong choice, or you buckle in when actually maybe it is time to make a change. And so really, being disciplined about what am I feeling specifically? Is it that my balance is off? Am I not using my strengths in this role anymore? Am I disappointing stakeholders? So I feel like I'm letting people down and that's getting to me. And then like asking, okay, why am I feeling this way? Which is a little bit what I was going into. And then depending on the answer to the question, it sort of informs what your next steps are.
Yeah.
In that case, like, hey, I feel like I'm disappointing everybody around me. That's a personal feeling, and it starts with a conversation. Like, hey, am I really disappointing everybody around me? Like it versus, I'm in a role where I just am not using my strengths anymore. It leads to a very different set of next steps. And so that like, hey, I don't recognize myself. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? And what does that tell me about next steps was a very helpful guide for me as I was navigating.
I wish I knew you 3 years ago.
So
that would have been really
can
good
I-
practical advice.
Can I add just a couple
Yeah,
things
please.
into that? So first, I mean, when you say, how do you know when it's the right time? I don't think there's a straight answer.
Yeah.
Like we're all giving, kind of things we went through, but you're not going to be able to call someone up and say, should I make this move?
Yeah.
It really comes down to all the key pieces of information, such as what both of you have said. But the other piece of it is that it's important to note is there are times you also have to look at your work-life balance. We're all talking about our work experiences and how we moved around within companies and then we made a decision. But in my prior life, before coming here, I got to a point where I was sick. I was so stressed, I wasn't sleeping at night. I didn't know which way was up or down. And it came to a point where I didn't have a balance anymore. And your health has to come first. And it was a lot of the reason why I decided to make the change.
Yep.
Because you're not going to be able to make a change and actually make an impact and add the value if you're not able to keep that balance.
Right.
And that's the one piece that, I mean, you guys hit really well on the career side, but I'm like, well, there's this work side too, that it's a major, major part of who we are and how you grow. And sometimes you have to make a big change in order to get that balance back.
And I love
So
that
true.
point because and that sort of goes back to the what am I feeling and why am I feeling that way? It would be really easy to make the wrong choice about work when it's really like, hey, there's something in life that is informing this, and I need to make a big work change as a result. But if you're myopically focused on work, you could very well miss like why you're having these, like you're not sleeping and
They are just so interchangeable though. Like I have been where you were, where my husband didn't recognize me.
Yes.
I didn't even see it first, but
That's
I
right.
know that I was different and I was so stressed out. And he actually just recently said to me, he's like, you're so happy, you're so like even keel. But it honestly took the first 6 months of being here. So for anybody who worked with me in the first 6 months, I was still reeling from my prior role and how stressed I was. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, and it will manifest physically. And it could be anything from weight gain, or I've experienced hair loss from stress, where like my hair was literally falling out because of all of the stress I was experiencing at work. And you just come to this realization, and sometimes somebody has to tap you on the shoulder and say, like, something's got to go. But you have to be mindful of yourself personally, because you can't give to others. You can't be your best at work if you find yourself at that breaking point.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say about that is sometimes you get to that breaking point, but there isn't a place for you to go to. And so you don't want to run away from something and just take the first next available opportunity just to get out. Maybe sometimes you do, frankly, just as a pivot point.
Right.
And that's okay. You can't do that very often, but like you could do it like once or twice in your career. But you want to run to something. And I think that is such a critical component of career management, is to always be running to the next thing.
And yes, and with that in mind, like being ready to run to it. So I had a professional resume writer like 2 years before I even, as I wasn't looking, LPL came to me. But I had like for several years started to think like, I don't know, like, I don't know, there might be. And so when the call came, I had the resume ready to go. And so kind of like
Smart.
having like keeping your options open and sort of keeping that check on yourself and like, hey, what am my gut is starting to tell me this. So what do I need to do in order to be ready if I were going to do something? But it's so important.
I'm going to go one step further, and where this got my head
We're
going,
taking over.
Nothing but time. I'll go. No worries. I'll leave you with the question.
I think we should talk about compensation.
Oh, yes.
Because to your point, as you were describing that, one of the things I thought about was marking yourself to market. We work in the financial industry. You should know what that means. Mark yourself to market and know your value and know your market value. And I think you need to always be kind of testing into that. And I don't want to be cliche and say that women don't do that as effectively as men, but the statistics would tell you we historically have not been paid as well as men have been paid. And you have to check yourself on that and be thoughtful about that. And so I think compensation is a component to career success and happiness, and making sure you are paid commensurate to the value that you bring. So that's another thing that I think, we should just put on the table as women. We've got to be really thoughtful about it. And I had a negotiation for a role that I remember, and this, I'm not proud of this, but I literally said to myself, what would Chris, my brother, what would Chris say in this moment? What number would he ask for? And so it bolstered me a little bit. I wish that I don't have a sister, so I didn't have a sister's name to put in the mix. But I wish I didn't have to think that way. But I did. I had to sort of take myself out of it. And frankly, I said, what would this man do in this situation? But I really learned a lot. It was earlier in my career, and I now know to advocate for myself in a really thoughtful way. But that's a part of this too, frankly.
And some of it is having the data.
That's right.
When you've been at one company for a long time, and I had no intention for a very long time of ever leaving, like you do sort of just like shut down the external world. And so like recreating that network of people to help you as you're making a decision is really big. And so like, again, tactical suggestion here, partnering with an external recruiter. As I started to say like, hey, maybe I will make a change, I wanted that benchmark. Like, here are my skills, here are my experiences. How do I mark myself to market? And what's a good offer and what's not in an event where like I didn't want to just ask for, a number.
Right.
So.
Well, and it's interesting, pay transparency has been recognized by the regulators, frankly. I mean, we are now seeing that where jobs are coming with pay ranges, and just, again, practical experience and suggestion, don't expect the top of the pay range. That's not why it's written on the piece of paper. There's reasons that there's a range. But I think that that's a wonderful other metric. And, there's a lot of ways you can get that information. Read job descriptions. If you think you're interested in something or you want to make a career change, read those job descriptions. Understand how a role is compensated. I think that's, you got to do your research. We'll talk a lot about this, I think, throughout this conversation, but you own your career. It is up to you. No one is managing your career for you. And so it's incumbent on us to do our research, to get our resumes in order, to be thoughtful about our network and keeping in touch with people, because at the end of the day, it's sort of that adage that no one thinks about you as much as you think they do. It's really true. So whether you've made a mistake or it's managing your career, no one's thinking about you as much as you are.
Yeah, I love that point of just knowing your worth and holding true to that. And the what, why, what, I think is, you have to send me what that is so we can send it in the recap out to the crowd. I think that's amazing, because often I think when you're at the end of your road with where you've lost sight of who you were at the beginning, or when you were passionate or at your best, right? You might lose a little bit of that confidence and that self-worth where you think, man, can I get back to where I was? Or I used to be great at this. Am I going to be great somewhere else? Or am I only great here? Like, I think you can get a little bit of that self-doubt, which then plays into saying, well, maybe I should ask for less money, or maybe I should stay because it's safer. And I think it is right. Don't be difficult. Don't be greedy. Where I think it is having the awareness, and what you said of being surrounded by people who say, no, you are, I can't swear on this, but a bad butt person. You can do these amazing things. So I think you can easily forget that when you feel lost in your career. So I love what you said there. Okay, this brings me to the next question, which frankly was the most common question we got. And you hit on it with the balance piece, but I'm going to read this verbatim so I don't mess this up. But how do you juggle climbing the corporate ladder, being a mother, and being a present spouse? Truly, how can you have it all, or can you?
You want me to start?
Well, Megan, we totally went off script and dominated. So
I
you
know,
like,
this is what I hope
my
for.
grandback.
No, so on this one, it's interesting. So as I stand here today, I am no longer married. However, I was right before I started LPL. So, but that adds a little bit of complexity to this question because now I'm a single mom
Right.
who has a leadership role, who travels for a living,
Mhm.
and I still have the responsibility of ensuring that all three of my children are taken care of.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to answer a little differently. But what I'll say is it possible? Yes. Time management is an extreme key. You need to basically time box yourself and say, at this time, I will walk away and I will ensure that if there are commitments for your kids, you're doing them. Years ago, it was work 24 hours. I didn't care. I missed many soccer games for my son. My son's a senior now.
Yeah.
I missed soccer and softball games for my daughters. I have identical twin daughters. They're 11. There's a lot of life that you have to ensure that that time management is down. Because if not, it will either tear you apart at your work or tear you apart at home. And it just, is it possible? Yes. But it's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that anybody can give you an answer to. But at the end of the day, the reason that I continue to push is because I am the single mom. If I don't push, if I don't, get to that next month of what
Mhm.
that goal is, how do my kids get to college? How
Yeah.
do they go to that, that prom dance that's coming up? I'm the only one that gets to really support that. And so they are my driver. So I make it work.
Right.
You hire a nanny, you call a dad and say, hey, can you help here?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I keep pushing. But it's my kids, it's the independence, and it's knowing that I can actually do it myself.
Yeah. And setting the
That's
boundaries,
awesome.
like exactly what you
It
said
has to
of
be.
if I need to pick up my son or daughter at this time, every meeting can run late, right? Like we're all obviously we're all talkers.
Yeah.
Like I think it is something where setting a firm boundary if I cannot be late to miss
Yes.
this and then following through.
Were you comfortable outsourcing before you were in this position? Or did you have to learn to
I had
let
to
go of
learn.
some things?
I had to learn to let go because it's been going on 10 years
Mhm.
since I've been married. And after that, you define your own structure. And when I was asked to come here 6 years ago, it was, hey, you're going to travel 50% of the time. That changes your structure all up. So
Sure.
I kind of gradually worked my way into that, but it
Mhm.
wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
I would, in between the meetings, I'm going to be 5 minutes late because I'm going and calling and checking on, being able to, at that time, not everybody used FaceTime, but I didn't get to see their faces every night. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's what mattered. So I
Yeah.
was like, can you send me a picture? I want to make sure they're not doing
Proof of life.
something new
Yeah.
without me,
Oh,
because my
yeah.
twins they were tiny. They were 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard.
So
Yeah. It is I think it is that balance concept that you hear people say you can have it all, you just can't have it all at the same time, and so on and so forth. I found a little bit of a different version. I worked all the time in my 20s and early 30s, and I found myself at 35 like, oh, well, gosh, I have a great career, but I don't have a life partner. Like, what have I been
Right.
doing? I had this sort of wake up call, and I had to dial back a bit and reset how I spent my time because I would have worked all the time too. I mean, I was on the road, I was available, sure, no problem. I was very fortunate. My husband is awesome, and he has been more than willing to do what it takes to help me in my career. In fact, like short story, but we were living in San Francisco. He had just gotten a new role with a company when my prior firm asked me to move back to New York. And he was like, okay. And it worked out. His company was able to transfer him, but he was willing to do it. It was no questions asked. Like, your career is so important to you. I had a friend once say, work is your sport, which is terrible, but true. And so I think, you do have to lean on others, you have to outsource, but it's not, there is no magical way to make it work. Unless you figured it out. If anyone's figured it out, it's you.
I'm actually excited. I'm gonna put myself out here a little bit. I'm excited for the first time in, I think, my professional career to not feel like the pot calling the kettle black as I answer this question. Like literally, I might have opted out of this question if it had been a couple years ago. So I will not say that I have it figured out, but I will say that LPL has made it much easier for me to do it compared to where I was. And I mentioned, like, hey, it wasn't the people at Vanguard, it wasn't the job, it wasn't the career development, and it was a lot of it was personal reasons. And so, Megan, I want to come back to something you said in a second, but rather than making it personal right away, what I want to evoke is kind of the visual image that I got when you asked the question. And I loved the question that said it, how do you juggle? Mm-hmm. Because I literally think juggling is like the way to think about it. Like, okay, if you have children, you have a spouse, and you have career, and you're juggling, like that is actually a way you can get your hand on all the balls at some time, but you can't hold them all at once. And so sometimes, it's how high do you toss one ball so that you can, hold on to one a little bit longer. But I think it's like you can't have it all at once for sure. And you sort of like, but giving yourself enough grace to say, hey, I need to have a flexible enough partner, and I need to build some outsourcing into my ecosystem to where I can take my hand off one ball every now and then, whether it's a great team at work or a great spouse at home. So that's sort of like the first point. The second point that I would make is know which balls are bouncy and which are crystal.
Ooh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
And I think that I had that, like, so I mentioned at the beginning becoming a mom at 30. How old am I? Becoming a mom at 38. After having spent years trying, by that point I was a CIO for 2 businesses, and suddenly I worked 24 hours a day, and I was married, and I'm chagrined to say that my husband got very good at being sort of a bachelor spouse because, like, I was married to my job. Mm-hmm. And so then you put a child into that, and like the equation no longer balanced on both sides. Yeah. And so really having kind of that life check and say, my relationship with my children, like, is the crystal ball. Whereas my spouse, my husband, he's amazing, was probably more forgiving than he needed to be for some of my crazy, work ethic earlier in my career. So maybe that was like maybe not quite a bouncy ball, but like it wasn't crystal. But it's like, in order for me to have, like, to do the juggling act, like, I need to think about letting something bounce. And it's like, so, not that I'm looking for quotable quotes here, but like, to me, I'm like, the quotable quote here is that the bounciest ball in that equation is your career. Yeah. And if the ball drops, or if you make a mistake, and so I think I was looking at my balance equation saying I need something different. And Megan, I've actually asked myself if I had been better in my at setting boundaries and just being more matter of fact, but some of that was me knowing myself and saying, like, I don't know in my current situation that I could set those boundaries appropriately. It was like I needed a clean break, and then saying, like, hey, I'm going to take a chance on LPL. The people are great. The strategy is amazing. Maybe it's the wrong decision, but that's going to bounce. My relationship with my son and my husband need to take precedence. So I would say, for any of you who are trying to figure out that juggling equation out there, do what Megan did first before you do something drastic like I did. But also don't underestimate the power of saying, I need something different. Yeah. Yeah. And so coming to LPL, where I'm remote, when I don't have a daily commute, I travel a good amount. I probably travel 50% of the time, but when I don't travel, I'm at home, which means I'm home and I'm there and my husband has an outlet.
Yeah.
And then when I'm traveling, like I don't have to worry about like, oh, it's bath time, it's bedtime. It's like, no, I can work 12 hours a day if I need to. That I figured out something that works for me. And that change has like made me feel like I can answer this question because for the moment,
Right.
like for the moment, I figured out how to juggle all of them.
Yeah. And I think you guys all really said this in a number of different ways of your career is not one thing, right? There's different seasons in it. So when your kids are young, right, you might need to be more hands-on, more involved, all those things where that season your career might take a backseat. And then when they get into school, like you might be able to say, I'm ready for the next promotion, I'm ready for this. And that doesn't mean you failed, right? It's just knowing what season are you in and what are you, to your point, juggling. That's the crystal ball of that season. And it might not always be the same thing. So I think it is a good way to look at it more holistically than just this decision is permanent, right?
And there are multiple ways to have it all.
Yeah.
I am having it all, but it wasn't and at my same job doing the same thing that I was doing. I am the mother that I want to be. I'm the executive that I want to be. But I did have to make a big change to make that happen.
Yeah.
And so keeping that open mind on like, hey, it is possible, but it's a juggling act, and sometimes things have to give that you never imagined having to give, but never letting go of that. But you actually can do it.
Yeah.
I think is a great way to think about it.
Yeah, and also making space for the fact that your version of having it all might not be what someone else wants.
So good.
Right? You could have someone on your team who says, oh, that's amazing, you have kids, not interested. And that's great for them, right? Like making space for that too. So there's not one version for everything.
You bring up a good point, though. You have to talk about what that looks like to your manager.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really important to be open about that, because when I joined the firm, I was very clear. My parents are getting older.
Yeah.
I need to be able to spend more time with them. I need to be located in a place where I can help them be successful aging adults.
Yeah.
And had I not said that and stood up for what was important to me, I would probably be worried about them so much more than I am, because of the situation I've been able to create for myself. I can spend more time with them. But you have to express that. No one knows what you're thinking or what your personal situation is. And I think to the earlier point about vulnerability too, I'd like to think that the world has evolved where your manager wants to hear this from you if you're comfortable sharing it.
Yeah, setting the right expectations. Absolutely.
That's literally like going back to taking control, like your career is something that you can control. Like that's a really great example of taking control through like, hey, I'm going into this new job. This is what needs to be true. Like I did something very similar coming to LPL. It's like, I will come, but here's what needs to be true for it. And so those moments of whether, hey, I have a new boss or I'm getting a new job or I'm switching companies can be these like mini moments of saying, I'm going to take control or I'm going to make some adjustments to the equation to make sure that I feel like I have what I need and that my career is my own.
Yeah.
I think that could be hard when you're earlier in your career and you may not have as much negotiation room. So just to be sort of clear on that front, you might have to negotiate slightly different things when you're just a couple years out of school than you would have the room to negotiate as you get more senior in your career. So it's an important, I think, just expectation to set. We're all fortunate that we have the flexibility that we have. We've also put in 20 years. And we've built a brand and we've built experience and we have a skill set that is unique.
Right.
But as you're coming up, I think it's important to be mindful of the fact that you may not have all the flexibility that you want, but if you work hard and you build that brand, you'll have it when it's probably most important.
Yep. Agree fully. Okay. Tell me this, guys. So what is your definition of success and do you feel like you've achieved it?
Being on this panel.
You nailed that. I was hoping you'd say that.
Being
Loaded
asked
question.
to be here with you today. Why don't you tell us what your definition of success is?
Guys, I'm just moderator. I mean, I'm happy to send out that after, but not about me at all.
I think, do you want to start?
Well, I mean, you and I have a thing where we take it down
Dig
rabbit
in.
holes. Yeah. So
I'm like, can I just put my head over there so I go, wait.
No, this is the hope. This is what we wanted out of this.
No,
So
no, I
please
know.
keep doing it.
Let's see, what is the definition of success and have you achieved it? Personally, I think that I've achieved a series of levels of success since I started my real career.
Mhm.
But am I done? No.
Mm.
I don't believe that I don't want. I mean, it's back to you need to control your own destiny.
Yeah.
You need to be willing to speak up. I do not want to be sitting in my same position in 20 years.
Yeah.
No, I want to continue to move forward. I want to continue to show just what I can do. So I'm not there yet. I mean, it's, have you achieved it? Yeah, I've achieved successes. I've learned a lot, but I'm not there yet. What do I see as the definition of success? I think that's a trick question.
Yeah.
And I think and the reason I say that is because every person I meet, every year that I grow, I would change that definition to something else. Because even sitting here right now, I would give you a different answer than I did a year ago. And so, I mean, I think it all depends on who you are. I mean, back to earlier, we were talking about at LPL, you get time directly with your clients. I absolutely love sitting down with an advisor and hearing direct feedback from them. I don't get to do that every day in my current position, but it's something I love, right? Over the years, I was working on our investor application and I got to deal with the direct end investors. That was awesome, right? I don't get to do that anymore right now.
Yeah.
So it's back to juggling, right? How many balls? How many positions have you held over the years? Is there one area you want? Do you want to continue to move forward with where you are? So it's a really tricky question, and I don't think I really know the answer for myself yet.
So I'll jump in. And I'll say that, like you, Megan, we have similarities in our answers. My definition of success has evolved over time. And I think it's also informed by recent experiences. So, some of what you shared, Kate, about some of the career experiences that you've been through. For the time being, for me, the older I get, I'm going to wax poetic for just a second. Like Emerson has this really famous definition of success. And it ends with, to know one life has breathed easier because you've lived. This is to have succeeded. And, I think going back to the evolution that I've gone through as a person over time, much earlier in my career, I imagined having like this really big, successful job and big job and whatever. And I think having achieved some measure of that, I've realized now that a position really means nothing. And Megan, you said this, like, if you're not happy, if your loved ones aren't getting what they need, if your health, physical, mental, emotional, like is suffering, like none of that matters. And so it's got to be the fulfillment in the job plus that sense of well-being that I'm taking care of all of my stakeholders and I'm doing right by them. Like, to me, like when that gets out of balance, that's a really good sign that change is needed. So I am excited to say, for the moment, I do feel very successful, but by that definition, right? And right. I am sure that as my life evolves, as my son gets a little bit older, like I'm going to have to reevaluate and change again.
Yeah. I think it is something that the answer changes is a really cool question to ask, though, because it's good for self-reflection. Yeah. Like, as I was listening to both of you describe this, I thought, oh my gosh, what is my definition of success? Earlier in my life, it was financial freedom. I wanted to be able to make whatever life choice I wanted to make because I had achieved a certain degree of success that gave me financial freedom. And that was, I remember when I felt like I hit that moment in my career. And that sort of evolved. Okay, I feel like I've gotten to that point and I'm comfortable with where I've gotten from that angle of things. And then success became, I want to be asked to do something new and big and different because I want to know that people have confidence in my abilities. And when I was asked to move back to New York with my last role, it was because of that. And that was amazing to be recognized and to be asked to take on this new big challenge. And that felt like, oh, okay, I am successful. then getting recruited by LPL. I felt like I was successful. So it's evolved so much. But I think the overarching aspect for me has been this thought around freedom and independence. Like my success has enabled me to make choices, to feel free and independent to do what I believe in.
Yep.
And the way that manifests, and it relates sort of back to my earlier point about being able to be around my parents more, I'm now able to do things for them that it's because I have put in my time and I have put in the energy and I have really worked hard that I can now give back to them in a way that's really important to me. And that's my current definition of success.
And I'm sure it'll change again. 10
No
more
doubt.
times, right?
No doubt.
I'd be
Yes.
concerned if it didn't, right? I
That's
think
right.
that's the goal, is that you're chasing after this North Star and then you get there and think, I did it, right? This is
Yeah.
amazing. What's
Yeah.
next? How do I keep my cup full?
Absolutely.
I love that. So you guys have talked a lot about brands and building brands over time and the work it takes to build a brand. I'm curious, what are the best things you've done for your brand? And what are the worst things you've done?
Well, I will jump in. And I'm gonna start with what are the worst things before the best things, because I actually would say that it's two sides of the same coin. And I'll tee a little bit off of, what I had said. I had this inflection point, and it was thanks to an amazing boss, and an amazing opportunity where I rotated out of technology for a while and into the business. This was at Vanguard. And up until that point, my career, I sort of had been I was never somebody ever who would run over others. I flat out won't. But I was also not somebody who went out of her way to help the people around me. I thought of a career more as like an individual sport. And so I did. And look, in fairness, I look back over my childhood and growing up, I was never on a team. Like, I was always the introvert. Like, if there was the opportunity to be on a team or to do it on your own, I always did it on my own because I could get my nose back in the book the fastest. I wasn't on a sports team, so I'm like, oh, it kind of makes sense. Like, I didn't know how to be on a team. And so earlier in my career, I was very heads down. I was very focused on, like, what am I trying to get done? Like, what do I need to do to finish whatever I'm doing and go back to whatever else. And then as I became a people leader, it was more like, how do I help my organization downward be successful? And that, it was never badly intended, ever. I was, again, going back to, I was never going to be a butthead, since I can't swear on camera. But I was also not going out of my way to help. But from everybody else's perspective, I was very successful. My career was moving very quickly, and I was very, like, focused and driven. And so the brand was, perception is reality, right? So the brand was, she's in it for herself. She only cares about, like, what she can get out of this. And, she's got, a path paved for her. I had the opportunity to go work for this boss. It was in our corporate strategy organization. And it was the first time I was on a team, and they were all smarter than I was, and they all knew a lot more than I was, because I was the technology person. I didn't even know the entire structure of the company. I couldn't spell most of our competitors. Like, I knew nothing, and I'm supposed to be in corporate strategy, right? And so I tell people now, looking back on that, I came into that job thinking about me. And on the other side of that job, 2 years later, I left thinking about we. And I never changed. The power and the satisfaction and the joy to help other people get something bigger done than any one of us could do ourselves, realizing that I'm not nearly as smart as I am in a whole other group of people. And that was so pivotal for me. And I recognized as I was leaving Vanguard what my brand was, as a person who brought others along, and a coach and a mentor and a developer of others, and a woman who supported other women. And, like, I would say, like, the focus on others and empowering and enabling others, it's counterintuitive, right? But that is an incredible brand, especially for women who care a lot about helping the next generation, relative to, hey, how do I get mine? Which just leaves people with the wrong impression or perception.
What is the phrase? Go by yourself, you go fast. Go with the team, you go far.
That's
I
right.
think there's so much freedom in recognizing that. Like, you don't have to do it all. You don't have to be responsible for everything, right? Like, when you recognize these people are smarter than me in different ways. I can delegate these things and we can do it faster and better and more innovative and challenged. And I love that.
How
That's great.
counterintuitive that is the secret to great leadership.
Yes.
Like, I don't have to be the smart one. You
Right.
guys, like, it
That's why we
doesn't
have you guys.
That's right. That doesn't seem normal, but that turns out the way that is.
Yep. Totally agree.
But there's one piece in that I would add, and that's that you actually, it's not only utilizing your team and growing, it's you growing. Your brand actually grows from your team. So you might have this vision in your head of this is who I want to be, right?
Yeah.
This is what I want my brand to represent. And as you continue to grow your network and within your teams, you actually learn too. And
Yeah.
that's like a pretty amazing thing when you're learning from your own team.
Mhm.
And to sit there and say, you know what, no, I don't want to go do that presentation. You do it. Your name should be on there.
Yep.
But that's still part of our brand,
Yeah.
right? Because we want them to grow just like we are.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to take the credit, right? Like, lift your team, empower your team.
That is definitely true. That is true. That, and your collection of your team plus you is your brand. I had a colleague who had it was just brilliant and just was so thoughtful about the way to change the business in wealth management. And he was the whole brand for his organization. And then he got a new role. And then no one knew what anyone else on his team did. And it was this inflection point where the team was left without a brand. And eventually the team was pulled apart because no one really knew who they were. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is so fascinating to watch. And it actually ended up hurting his brand in the long run because for the obvious reasons. And so to your point, Megan, I think it's so important. You have to ask the folks on your team, have you built your own relationships? Do you have your own brand? Have you presented? Are you making the rounds to build your network? And it will help your brand. That's sort of the added benefit of it, but it is really important to have your own brand.
Yeah. And in theme of what today is, we are almost near the end here. So we probably have time for one or two more, but I would love to know, just with the topic being what it is, right? Rising the ranks. It isn't just about you guys individually, but how do we rise together? Mm-hmm. What are the things you do to empower and help the women that you are working with at your organizations rise and really have that confidence?
It's everything. It's inviting them to the meeting. It's having them in the room. It is, again, it to me, it is about the individual and knowing what it is that they need. I think it's giving really honest feedback too. Yeah. And I had a situation recently where I was observing in real time, okay, this could have been done a little bit differently. And with this little tweak, I think this could have gone better. And it was within an hour of the meeting ending, making sure that feedback was fresh and given and in a thoughtful way that really would, allow someone to act on it. I think that's all really important. Yeah. It is, to be really straightforward with people and to help them. And of course, it's when you get an opportunity. Like I recently had someone reach out to me about a role, and I'm super happy here. So I said, I have 3 women in my network I'm going to send this to. And one of them is interviewing now. And it's, it's just that like being really thoughtful about how you introduce opportunities or give feedback or, just investing really frankly in the women in your network.
I heard 2 things there. Real-time feedback. I think that is so crucial. Feedback doesn't need to be in your mid-year review. It can be in the moment, doesn't need to be scary. And 2, I think speaking about women when they're not in the room.
Yes. Right?
Like they don't need to be there to speak on their behalf. You saying, I know 3 incredible women who could do this. Let me introduce you. I think that's so powerful.
So, I'll build off of that for a second, because I think that idea of speaking up for women when they're not in the room and also understanding the role that each of us have in helping with gender representation overall. I am much faster to gravitate to another woman that I think is successful. And I think now, us in senior leadership positions, like looking and intentionally building leadership teams that are balanced, that are gender balanced too, because the more of us there are, and I tell people that the more of us there are, the more there will be below, and it becomes this virtuous cycle. So I think that idea of like being really intentional about the fact that we are in a privileged position, and using that to make sure that we're doing our part to add, to the wood pile, I think is really important. Separate point, I think, one thing that I find really important, and I can look back over my career and know how important this was, is genuinely listening. So building deep and trusting relationships where I'm listening and helping the person be seen. Yeah. Because when, I don't know about any of you guys, maybe I'm just weird, but I have a hard time receiving feedback from somebody if I don't feel like they understand where I'm coming from, or if they don't if they don't have the background, or on the other side, however, of feeling like somebody really knows me, knows my background, knows my quirks, knows where I'm coming from, and then they give me feedback, I am so very open to it. Right. And so building that foundation of trust where you're really I'm quiet. I'm not quiet here, but I do try to be quiet at, in those mentoring meetings where I'm building the relationships, because just making, especially if it's a confidence thing, I see you and I believe in you, are so very powerful, and not enough of us hear that often enough.
Yes, I want to add two things. So one, the feedback, agree, totally valuable, but I also think you have to understand where the person wants to be, right? As part of that conversation. Do they want to grow? Do they want to move to the next level? Right. Do they want to do a lateral move, right? Because based on that answer could be a different decision of how we help.
Yeah.
The second part of it, which I'm going to go on the feedback a little bit, that I've noticed works well, is after you provide the feedback, is if you're seeing that happen on live, it's actually mentoring them behind the scenes. Yeah. It's pinging them and saying, hey, you might want to ask this question, or you might want to direct where you're going to this place. And it's still them driving, but you're still coaching behind the scenes to help them grow. And, people are like, why do you do that? And I'm like, I've got a lot of people that are like, hey, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, yeah. I needed that extra push. Sometimes we need it. And so I think that's how we help one another. It's don't be afraid to say, hey, you seem to have a little bad day yesterday. Right. Maybe if you positioned it this way. Yeah. And I think we all take, a few minutes, we step back and we breathe and we say, you know what? We could have done that differently. And then we learn from it. Yeah. Feedback is such an interesting one because it's so about how you want that person to walk away feeling. So your communication style might not be theirs. And to your point, like you say, you want someone to really know you. Someone else might say, just tell me, right? If I have food in my teeth, just let me know. I don't need you to know me first. So I think it is really thinking of, if I'm giving this person feedback, how do I want them leaving feeling about the conversation? What do I want them doing with that? So if you want that person to show up better in front of the client and they're wearing a tank top to work, you're probably thinking, okay, we want to focus on what's the brand they want? How do they want to show up versus what are you doing wearing a tank top? So I do think you can really try to put yourself in other people's shoes, and it goes a long way. Okay, so for sake of time, I will ask one more thing, and it doesn't need to be a million answers, but you guys have all shared that you've worked for incredible people over the years. You've had great bosses, you've had terrible bosses, and probably everything in between. So I'm curious, and I think the crowd would feel the same way, of what is the most impactful advice that you have received throughout your career that really helped you get to where you are now?
I'll give you one that wasn't from a manager, but actually from a friend. Yeah. And I will never forget sitting at dinner in New York with my friend Anne, and we were talking about our careers. And she said to me that, and this was actually advice that was given to her that she relayed to me. She said, you've got to get commercial. You've got to be commercial and choose experiences that will make you more commercial. And that word just was so powerful. And so the way I interpret commercial is, you know how to analyze data, you know how to present, you know how to lead a discussion in a room, you know how to talk with clients and how to evolve your communication style based on whether it's a client or a colleague, like those very basic, fundamental, foundational skills that I was fortunate to pick up in consulting, because those all are aspects of what you learn when you're in consulting. But I would just recommend to others, reflect on yourself. Do I have all those basic commercial skills in my toolkit? And if there's something that you think is missing, maybe it's public speaking, join Toastmasters, learn how to be more comfortable in front of a camera or in front of a group of people. I think that concept of being commercial, once you get that, everything grows off of that. That was the most poignant advice I was ever given.
That is a unique one. I love that. I haven't heard that.
That's really good. So I wish I had like a pithy, be more commercial like that. I'm like, oh, that's really good. But I'm thinking more about like, hey, the most impactful advice. So I don't have a sentence for it, so I'll explain the concept, because it was something that I watched in action as opposed to something that it was my what. I ask myself why a million times a day, and like trying to figure out like why did this person do this? Why am I feeling this way? Like I ask why. And I think for me, it was watching this. She was an amazing boss who always received feedback and positioned feedback in a way of like, hey, this is going to make me better.
Yeah.
Like up until like that point in my career, I think you, Margaret, were the one who said we have this crippling need, women in particular, to be perfect. And getting feedback was sort of like, oh, like that you just told me I wasn't perfect. And I really was trying hard to be perfect, and that was really hard to hear. And you walk away sort of defeated.
Yeah.
And the way she delivered feedback and the way she would receive feedback was like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to grow. And that what the concept is going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And sort of this belief that I have a fixed set of characteristics and I'm only going to be able to change so much. And so I am who I am, versus I am not fixed.
Yeah.
I can be who I am here today, and I can decide I'm going to change and grow and evolve, and I'm going to use this feedback to make me better. And it changed my entire attitude and outlook about feedback, about self-reflection, and looking for opportunities and taking risks and saying the hard thing, and all because of that mindset shift of like, hey, no, I believe I can change, and this failure is actually an opportunity to grow and get better. Like failure is not final. So I wish maybe I need to come up with the single sentence for it, but that's the idea.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, real quick. Honestly, mine, I don't have the pretty slogan either. I think the biggest thing I've learned is only sign up for what you can control. I learned that from a external consultant about a year ago. And basically they said, your team, you continue to always think that you can solve the world.
Yeah.
And you can't. And you have a specific set of accountability and ownership. You've got to stick to what you can fully control versus what you might be consulted and, kind of more of a responsible party. And I think at times we run so fast that we forget that. We forget that we're all here to help one another, and we might sign up for things that we shouldn't. So I always think about it now instead of, just signing up.
Yeah.
But it actually has helped me just honestly even think about life sometimes a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, what do they say? If it isn't I'll say heck. If it isn't a heck yes, it's a no.
Yeah.
Right. So either fully committed or setting the boundary.
Yes.
Ladies, I mean, 90 minutes. We are nearing the end. So thank you guys all so much. This was everything I hoped for and more. So just having this uninterrupted time with three of you guys. I know I don't always have this opportunity. I'm sure everyone in the audience doesn't get the chance to really peek behind the curtain. So you guys more than vulnerable about everything asked. Frankly, I threw a lot of questions at these ladies that came in, and there was none that you said, hey, I won't answer, or hey, I won't do. All of you guys were like, I'll take this. It's just incredibly willing. And I feel like it goes without saying, you guys aren't looking out for just yourselves. You're trying to share the knowledge and give back. And what you guys said at the beginning of people invested in you, how do you invest in others? So tremendously obvious. So thank you guys so much. This was amazing. Yeah, so really, really thankful for the time. So last thing I will say, all of you guys, thank you so much for everyone in the audience. This has been 90 full minutes. I mean, we are down to the final minute here. So I hope it was as meaningful for you as it was for all of us. So our goal is to do more events like this, potentially make this a series. So would love to cover just pivotal topics. So you guys will receive a survey, I believe tomorrow, that should share, if you want to share feedback on what you liked, what you'd like to see differently, and really just anything you felt like we could do to improve or what you really got out of this. So lastly, if you were inspired today to learn more about careers at LPL, please visit the career site, careers.lpl.com, or click on the links that we will provide in the email tomorrow. Otherwise, thank you all so much for the time. This was incredible, and I hope to talk to you all soon. Thank you, guys.